Hey, Kerfuffle fans, welcome back to the latest episode. And today I have an amazing guest. I have actually known this guy for quite a few years, and he represents one of the most interesting industries and is one of the best kept secrets in the state of California. So you're going to hear it first here. And if you don't know who Loren Pearlman is, you need to look out into the future because this guy's got a lot going for him, and he's going to be knocking doors and kicking down all sorts of walls coming up in the future, and he is the creme de la creme when it comes to California. So without further ado, Loren, welcome to the show.
Sean, great to talk to you on your podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, Loren, there's just so much to unpack with you and so much to talk about, but I think the main thing that you and I are going to talk about today is the insurance industry and the state of insurance affairs when it comes to homeowners and property owners insurance, not only in California, but probably around the United States. And, you and I both have a lot of experience working in this industry, but you're seeing a lot of crazy stuff going on in California and with some of the stuff that you're working with. So do you want to tell the fans a little bit about yourself, and we can start from there?
Yeah. So I have kind of a non sequitur path getting into the insurance industry. I grew up inner city Chicago. I was a rough child, minority in my neighborhood, and I was rolling around with the wrong people. I didn't take school seriously. I was like one of those kids that always got 100% on a test, never did their homework, showed up when they wanted to. And my parents are very hard working middle class people. They said, we're not supporting you being a dipshit. So they gave me some options. I was 2 weeks at the Y or join the military. And I joined the military. I figured I'll get a surrogate parent, Uncle Sam, and, joined the Coast Guard. I did 11 years, did some very cool stuff, traveled the country, never had to see any war or conflict, which a lot of my friends have. And I got to say, after 11 years in the military, it doesn't matter what branch of service you are in, deprogramming from that took time. So I got out 2016 and I had a wife and a son and a house at that point. They wanted to move me back to Chicago. I said, no, I'm staying in San Diego. And ended up going straight to yeah, right. So Chicago, I will maintain, is a beautiful place, wonderful spot to visit. I don't want to live there again. But I stayed here in San Diego, have a beautiful home in Oceanside, California, and went to San Diego State, got a degree in industrial and organizational psychology. And the goal was to go teach upper level management how to invest in their employees in a way that their employees would return that investment to them. And then through the course of this degree, realized I have enough of my own issues. I shouldn't be telling other people what to do. So shifted gears, got out of the Coast Guard and then graduated from college. And, at the height of COVID, 2019. And I figured with a, honorable discharge and a great service career and degree, I should be hireable, right? Wasn't really the case. So through a dozen or so jobs, I was a boat mechanic. I did trade show fabrication, event lighting with my buddy's company, a whole menagerie of other jobs. I landed in Affleck's lap and I was doing life accident and health. And it was so boring. and one 4th of July, I come home, it's raining from my ceiling. I call my pastor buddy. He said, you need a public adjuster. So he sends this guy out to my house. And I ended up letting this guy adjust my claim. And I wasn't happy with what he did to represent me, but I saw how much money he made. So I'm not going to lie. The initial wow factor to this industry was I wasn't making money, and this looked like a very lucrative path that I could support my family with. That drive in this industry has shifted. What I've found that I'm most passionate about, coming from a background of being bullied a bit as a kid, I really love beating up on bullies. And there's a lot of them on the carrier side in this industry. And I'm ruthless. I don't come out with my teeth out. I try and build the Art of War, that book, it says.
Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu, he says, build a golden bridge with which your enemies can retreat on, right? So I give them everything they could possibly need to approve anything I put in front of them, 100 different arguments for any one thing. And I wait for them to trip up. Then I use it against them. And I take a very scientific approach to what I do. I have an inquisitive brain. I loved playing with Legos as a kid. Rebuilding people's homes is something that I'm very passionate about, or at least making sure that they have the funds to do that, and that they've been referred to contractors that aren't going to abuse the process to profit and line their own pockets. I work with about 20 or so vendors in my area, and I have hundreds of contacts. I don't want to talk to most of them. I have it, but I have a unique approach too, where I find a vendor is really driven to do good, but they don't really understand the process. Instead of telling them, I don't want to work with you, I say, what can we do to collaborate with each other and develop a process that we can work together with? So I have mitigation companies that I traditionally would avoid, that I'm now taking opportunities to work with, just to do training with their technicians on site. I think there's a huge disconnect between what technicians do and the people that actually submit the documentation to the carrier, helping them bridge that gap so they understand why they're documenting what they're documenting and how I'm going to use it. So I don't know, I've been doing this since 2019 now. And I started my own company about 8 months ago. That came after a long string of working for other public adjusting firms that I didn't generally agree with the ethos on. I understand you got to do work to keep the lights on, but I have military benefits, and I don't have that same feast or famine thing. I'd rather wait for claims that I'm able to actually help with than just sign a contract and hope something gets settled out on it,
Yeah.
So the insurance market's interesting in California, but I think the genesis goes like Florida makes some big changes, then Texas follows, then California follows. So I'm constantly paying attention to what's happening in other states in anticipation of it coming here. But I think we public adjusting's got its work cut out for it. Nobody wants to work with us.
So for our fans that are listening, Loren, that don't know what a public adjuster is, and we know it's the best kept secret in the insurance industry, can you explain a little bit for those that don't know what exactly a public insurance adjuster is?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I have this is a broad definition, but it's kind of the way that I approach it is I'm a consumer advocate first when somebody has suffered a property insurance loss, right? So my goal in approaching any claim is not to sign a contract and get representation, but guide them through what their policy entitles them to, have a discussion about the facts of their claim, how they can compile documentation for it on their own, and some hoops that they can jump through in filing their claim, what to make sure that they're saying and not saying too, right? Some people go, I had a flood in my house. It's like, no, you had a burst pipe. And if you say flood, there's some dipshit on the phone going, oh, flood denied. They don't care. They're not fact checking, right? So consumer advocacy first, right? Claim strategy planning, decide whether or not you can do it on your own. But I use a good analogy. It's like, if you have a complex tax return, you wouldn't trust yourself to do it. You'd go hire a tax attorney or a CPA. It's the same thing with your most valued asset, your home. You got to make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect it. And I mean, I am at the end of the day arguing for more money, but with my psychology degree, I end up being sort of like a claims therapist through this process. I'm explaining it. I have extreme disclosure. I make sure all my clients understand everything that's happening every step of the way. They're CC'd on all correspondence. But as a public adjuster, when you hire me, I'm in charge. It's like signing a power of attorney to trust my process and make sure that I'm going to get you through the finish line. I have a great track record of doing it. I have over 350 clients that I've served in the last 5 years. And I won't lie, it started off really rough. I don't envy any of the first 10 clients I represented. You know? We got them there. It was a fight, but it's very much a learning process. With 5 years in, I am far from being a 100% on everything that is happening in this industry. The goalposts are constantly moving. You have to change strategy all the time.
And what most people don't understand is, for the exception of, I think, one, maybe two states in the United States, a public adjuster is tied to the claim in order to get paid. So it's not like the insurance company that can still collect premiums while the case is still ongoing because they can charge you. Your payment is tied to if or when the property owner gets indemnified by the insurance company. So you're basically out of pocket for all your expenses in hopes that you can make a profit, or at least break even in worst case scenario, instead of losing money for any type of insurance claim.
Right. So my contract is a contingency agreement. I signed for a % of the claim. And, one of the frustrating things about public adjusting, and maybe in California more specifically than anything else, is that there's really no requirement on what a public adjuster can or can't charge, right? It's just on the claim itself. I take it a step further. I will often issue addendums to my clients. I don't take expenses on incurred costs for additional living. So anything in excess of what you would typically spend prior to the claim, right? So if they need housing, I'm not taking fees on it. If they have meal expenses, I'm not taking fees on it. If they have increased gas costs, utility bills, all that stuff is bundled under ALE. I say that is the insured's benefit. They're entitled to the entire amount. I know other public adjusters that take fees on everything. I make sure that my clients, before I even start adjusting the claim, if they've been dislocated from their home, they have a stable place to stay for themselves and their family, and that they're comfortable with it, so that when we go through this exhaustive process of adjusting their claim, they have a place to feel secure in. But you have typically 4 different coverages and maybe a menagerie of endorsements that are underneath a policy. Reading through policy language is a challenge for anyone. And there are degrees out there in interpreting policies. I happen to, in the Coast Guard, write policy and affect legal changes for the Coast Guard. So reading through these documents is something that I had experience with long before I even got here. It's crazy how life experience translates to this industry. My attention to detail, project managing 20 people on a claim, making sure all the pieces are moving. I call it like a carnival game with the ducks and the squirt gun. Six ducks on any given claim with 20 different claims at a time. You have to make sure all of them are moving and that you're keeping track of where they are and where they need to be. So it takes a village. I do not work by myself. I have another public adjuster, Chelsea Wilhite, who I'd love to introduce you to one day. She's got 16 years on the carrier side. She was a manager for Farmers, worked for Bamboo, USAA. She is an invaluable resource on understanding the carrier's approach. So she and I work as a team. We split claims pretty much 50-50 so that we can manage our workload and still maintain our quality of life, Prior to that, I was working for another firm. I had 89 claims in a year. I think that's a ridiculous workload for any public adjuster, given the amount of attention to detail that I do bring to the table here. So I don't know if I really answered your question of what a public adjuster is. There's a lot of different ways to treat this. There's different calibers of public adjusters. You've got the babysitters. They sign contracts, they sit on the claim, they collect unguaranteed amounts, and they assign a contractor in hopes and supplements come through. I don't really look at that as what I do, right?
Right.
My approach is to do forensic investigations. So I was in a $14 million home yesterday in La Jolla for 4 hours, just putting stickers on walls, casting shadows to find hidden water damage that the MIC company wasn't addressing.
Wow.
That inspection's tomorrow. And I'm going to walk through with this adjuster, and I'm going to double the scope of demo on this loss. And without even having written an estimate yet, I'm already proving my value.
Wow.
So I treat each loss differently. I've been writing protocols on how to do this. There is no playbook for public adjusting. That's the scary part.
You learn as you go.
You learn as you go, and who you hire, if you don't vet what they do to provide a service for you, you could just be paying somebody for having a title behind your claim, you know?
Yep.
But fortunately, I've built a really great network of great public adjusters. I have a dozen or so that I communicate with regularly. We ask each other questions about unique situations. You know, the ego is not the way to approach this, you know?
Right. But we're also seeing a big change in the insurance industry. You brought it up earlier. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of address with you, because I'm East Coast, you're West Coast, and I'm licensed in California. I don't really practice that much in California. I've done a handful of claims, but East Coast, West Coast. But this is a national thing where you're starting to see insurance carriers raise premiums, have less coverage, or people getting dropped with coverage, and higher deductibles, less things that they're able to file on, maybe like there's no wind coverage, things of that nature, and all this stuff. Now, are you starting to see a lot of that in California, and what's your read on that?
Well, there's definitely been a dip in people willing to file insurance claims now that we have this very real threat that you could have your premiums astronomically increased or be dropped entirely. Obviously, in California, our biggest issue here isn't weather claims, it's fire. It was, a very large state with a lot of wooded areas. And as we continue to accommodate the housing needs of the communities here, we are butting into urban areas that are, or rural areas that are typically, woodland areas, and brush management is terrible in California. I could put my tinfoil hat on and say that the Palisades could have been avoided. I was in Malibu at one of my properties, and there's this giant water tank on the hill, and this whole community had burned. And I was like, well, you have a water tower right there. Why didn't you guys use it? They're like, well, no, that was dedicated to another municipality. They never used it to put the fire out here.
Oh,
we all know that in the Palisades, they literally had the hoses run out of water. This was because we had deferred maintenance on dams. They couldn't fill reservoirs all the way. Brush management had been deferred since prior to COVID. It was a perfect storm.
Yeah, I saw that. I remember going through Palisades, and I was shooting a documentary, took my drone up, and it was the most eerie feeling when you're walking around 50, 60, 70, $100 million homes, and you're going inside them. And I was with an industrial hygienist that we both work with, and he was doing testing, and I'm seeing Christmas decorations, and this is March, still food in the sink, left over because people had to evacuate. The only thing you're seeing is maybe a contractor down the street and a coyote run across the road. It was really weird. And the specific Palisades fire, along with Altadena, and there were some different areas, really opened my eyes to how California handles insurance claims, especially with the FAIR plan that you guys have out there. And it was like, wow,
such a bad service. It's like the only insurer that doesn't want new policy holders and refuses to pay. Like they don't want to be an insurer. We have a larger issue at whole, I think, with the insurance industry with retention. I just read an article yesterday about 20% attrition rate within 3 years of coming on board. It takes at least 2 years to understand what you need to do in this industry. And that's with good mentorship, So you've got a lot of uneducated insurance adjusters that are being hired through third-party systems or management programs so that they can support large insurers in the state. You'll have independent adjusters, and all of them are being taught to adhere to carrier guidelines, which are often in conflict with, California insurance code regulation and law, and they treat it as edict. My whole game is separating adjusters from internal guidelines, from their carrier guidelines, and forcing them into situations that they would not regularly encounter. I do that through the comparative bid process. I like to trade things out, But as far as the insurance market's going, I see rough times ahead. we have a major disparity between the standard income in a home and the cost for premiums. Raising premiums $1,000 or $2,000 on the low end a year is really screwing people over who already have heavily budgeted, regimens on how they can survive in this state. It's the most expensive state. What are the sixth biggest economy or ninth biggest economy in the world? Cost of living here is ridiculous to start. Now we're adding on, putting these additional premiums on people's policies and reducing coverage. You gotta question, why am I even considering home ownership? Fortunately, I don't live in a fire zone. I have USAA. They've been amazing with me as a military veteran. Coverage has never been an issue. I've had a handful of claims over the years, but my encounters with some of the other larger carriers in my area have been nothing short of contentious, and documenting regional disparities, right? Like the way State Farm manages claims in San Diego versus in Orange County is completely different. Those managers have different approaches. On a large loss in Orange County, they'll assign a contracting consultant on day one, acknowledging that their desk adjuster does not have the knowledge base to get through this entire claim without one. Versus San Diego, they'll write a sheet in Exactimate missing, hundreds of line items and say, no, this is all you're going to get. And then I have to fight tooth and nail to get them to agree to bring on a preferred vendor or somebody that could opine further. I have a great claim in Rancho Santa Fe that is in year 3. I started with a $24,000 payment. I pushed it over $800K, and now we're going to appraisal. It's just 24 grand for this amount. It's part of their game, right? So this is a profit-driven industry. I don't think, at least the older generation, still have this belief that the quips you hear on marketing from large insurers mean something, right?
Right.
You have an entire generation that still believes an adjuster is going to show up with a checkbook and write checks to you saying, oh, here's what you're owed on site, right? Those days are over. Now you have different levels of authority between each payment. Like, say, Bamboo, their upper management is 2 or 3 levels above the desk adjuster that you speak with, has a $100,000 approval authority.
Wow. That's not really much on a $13 million home.
I'd say it's nothing, right? So, I typically deal with larger losses, and I get a lot of my clients get really frustrated because, I'm really good at getting the ball back into the carrier's court for review or determination of coverage. And I do that pretty quickly, but then on the flip side, California Department of Insurance gives them 40 days to come up with a review of that estimate or report, and they often exceed that. I mean, even if you have the best adjuster ever who is totally motivated on top of their shit, they might have 100 claims on their desk. You're still stuck in a queue of them trying to frantically work through every single claim before they get back to you. And I don't want to disparage the Department of Insurance. They have a very small operation. They're in Sacramento. I think there's like 5 or 6 people handling complaints for an entire state.
Yeah, wow, that's it? That's
it? Yeah,
it?
it's not great.
That's all types of insurance too. That's not property insurance. So health insurance, auto insurance, all that stuff.
You file a complaint with the Department of Insurance. They have 21 days to respond to you. And then when they do come back, it's usually like, oh, there's a public adjuster assigned to this. You already have representation. We don't argue anything that has to do with the value of a claim. We only care about violations of California Insurance Code, regulation, and law. If they do go back to the carrier, it's a very menial fine, $500. The only real benefit about filing a Department of Insurance complaint is, 1, papering the file, right? Got to make sure you're documenting that there were issues. And 2, it might escalate it to a management personnel that actually cares, turns around and says, hey, fix this now.
It also helps if a claim would happen to go for some reason legal. Like if you're maxed out in what you can do as a public adjuster and you're not making any headway, sometimes these claims have to go legal and you have to get an attorney involved. I would imagine those complaints would help if it went to some sort of a legal parameter.
Yeah. And I would say that if for any insurance adjuster that happens to cross this video here, or this interview, and sees that I have filed a Department of Insurance complaint for them, that is me largely papering the file in anticipation of this becoming litigation or appraisal, right? I am very good at leaving a breadcrumb trail. I'm legally not allowed to practice law, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean I can't document it. And being
Right.
familiar with the law is very important in this industry. So I understand when things are outside of my wheelhouse. And I'm the first one to tell my clients when things are starting to get too complicated for me. But that doesn't happen often. I would say less than 5% of my claims go to litigation, less than 10% go to appraisal. The vast majority get resolved without issue. I mean, I shouldn't say without issue.
That's pretty good statistics. That's pretty good
Yeah.
statistics. As I can speak for here in Florida, it's so bad for public adjusters that we're able to negotiate certain amount of what we're able to assert. It's changed. When I first got into the industry almost a decade ago, you used to be able to not send anything to a legal entity for almost 8 out of 10 of your cases. But now it seems like more to like 7 out of 10 of your cases go to the legal entity, because there's so many bells and whistles and trips that they can throw in your way to block you getting anything. And now they're even leaving our names off the checks. So
Yeah.
public adjusters now taking the risk of working a case and a client not paying him, which I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's happened to me multiple times. You spend years working for this person. They call you up and say, "Hey, can you give me a discount?" And you're like, "I just worked 3 years trying to settle your case, and we're talking about, not a significant amount of money." And I've had clients forge my name, everything.
And I haven't, so I'm fortunate to not have really been in those situations under my own firm, but working for previous firms, absolutely. Collections was the bane of my existence. I hated it. And I was working for this company that had 5 administrators, and I at one point had like $350K in outstanding invoices under my name. And I was adamant that with 5 administrators at this company, they should be in charge of making sure the collections happen. I agree with the payment management system. I, in California, am entitled to have my endorsement on the check, and I use a third-party management system called Inc.
Yes.
Yeah. So Inc. has developed leaps and bounds from what it was just a few years ago. And this helps delegate funds, so if there's a contractor on your claim with a direction to pay, and the insured and I have had a conversation with it about them, I will be able to effectively direct deposit that contractor in accordance with their, phase of reconstruction and payment schedule, making sure they check boxes. I don't like doing project management for homes on large losses that are really convoluted. I will be actively involved in payment management if the insured asks me to. But payment hasn't really been an issue. It's a part of my vetting process before I agree to work with somebody, is making sure that I'm not going to have an issue with that. So you're absolutely right. And talking about fee scales too, let's just take a standard $100,000 claim. I sign it at 10%. 10 grand gets allocated to me, right? It takes me maybe 3 to 6 months to get you that $100,000. If you break that down to a daily value, I'm working well below minimum wage.
Minimum wage, yep.
Right. But insureds don't see that. They see the 10 grand as a whole, and they don't really understand or have the capacity to acknowledge how far this claim could have got without a public adjuster involved. Now, that's just simple math. I typically will not take a claim under $100,000 now. That's largely because I don't want to inundate myself with work that distracts me from my other clients. So I work higher dollar claims at a lower volume so that I can give individualistic attention to people. It's almost a little more boutique. And the reason that I'm able to do that is because I have military benefits. I don't have to face feast or famine. My bills are covered. I could backpedal and totally withdraw from this industry and have my bills covered and feed my family ramen for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's not good for you, though. Then you wind up looking like me.
It's not the path I want to take. I'm very type A. I'm aggressive in what I do. I'm passionate about it. I'm here on a mission. I know when I was first talking about what the public adjusting industry is, I didn't really get to talk about what drives me. What drives me in this industry is, I call it, well-paid social work. I'm not just an advocate for your insurance claim. I become the therapist for this claim. Nobody else is able to sit down and allocate the time to speak about what's happening in your claims process. And I really enjoy breaking that down for people. A lot of my clients that have had a second insurance loss have just called me for advice and navigated it on their own. That's what I hope for. I don't want to have to adjust your claim. I think it's a little ridiculous that public adjusters exist in the first place. If carriers really wanted to, insurance companies, they really wanted to get rid of public adjusters, they just do a better job, you know? But like what you see happening in Florida, I think that it's speaking volumes to what the public adjusting industry does. Everybody's screaming fraud, bad faith, you know, public adjusters are crooks. But really what's happening is public adjusters are causing losses for insurance companies who are 100% driven by numbers, right? And my stats are ridiculous. I'm on average, I'm able to get 500-600% more on a claim. And that shouldn't be the case, right? Based off of somebody's initial settlement, you have an adjuster come out, they write a scope of repair for the property, they are beholden to Exactimate, they haven't used any consultants or licensed contractors in determining an outcome. And then I come in, like on this La Jolla loss, you've got kitchens, flooring, really lavish lath and plaster that's really ancient to the property. This is going to be an immense cost if you trade it out with licensed vendors to determine the costs on this thing. But the carrier is going to be fighting tooth and nail to keep us within their own system.
Right.
So by bringing in a cabinetry vendor for this insane kitchen that they had, they're going to be able to outline and determine a value and a scope of repair or replacement that is far more valid than what any insurance adjuster can write.
Yeah, you brought something up interesting earlier where you said you're kind of a therapist. And for people that really don't understand what that means, I know for me as a therapist, the clients come to me first, they're needy, then they're greedy. Like they don't want to pay at the end. But you're dealing with a client, not all of them, but a client's going to call you on a Saturday night at 11 o'clock drunk. Hey, what's going on with my claim? So you're getting hollered at by the client. Things are not going fast enough. You're getting hollered at by the insurance company that's telling the client, oh, you shouldn't hire a PA, or, you know, they're dragging your feet out. And then you're getting yelled at by also the referral or the contractor a lot of times by saying, how come that person didn't use my services after you adjusted the claim? And meanwhile, you're getting beat up left and right from all aspects of it. And really, you're an administrator, but you're a counselor. And you also, for all intents and purposes, really take, I hate to use this term, but take the most risk, because the insurance company is guaranteed they're going to get paid their premium. The homeowner is going to get a check and they're going to get their money. The contractor is going to get paid. You take the chance of not getting paid a lot of times.
Yeah, I don't have a right to lien. You know, a general contractor can put a lien on somebody's property if they don't get paid. I would have to hire a collections company to go after clients. Again, fortunately, I've never had to do this. But it is something that I've looked into. My vetting process, I've walked away from, so I mean, let's put it this way. I don't want the headache of a bad client. I had a client in Coronado Island I'd represented for 237 days, and they had this losing battle with Liberty Mutual. A property below them, their condo had engulfed in flame and was gutted to the sticks, and they had extensive smoke damage, and Liberty Mutual is saying, nah, we don't see it. You can wipe everything down. So I brought in a team of people. I said, hey, here's a really great contractor. They're willing to stick it out with you until we can find a resolution. It's probably not going to happen for another year or so. And this is going to be a really difficult process. I'm helping you find a team of altruists that want to support you in the outcome. And she was treating this situation as if it was a profit opportunity for everybody that was involved, and was being really rude and inconsiderate on a group text. Wrote all this admonishing texts to this contractor, calling him an idiot. And I called her on the side and I said, hey, I just got to let you know, I fought really hard to put this team together for you. Everybody that's here is trying to get you back in your home with no possibility of pay for the next year. I can't have you disparaging them on group text. If you have issues, you got to call me directly. And she lost it on me, started making personal attacks on my family. Yeah, I'm 237 days into this claim. I've been charged estimating fees, 100 hours of phone calls and inspection hours, and working with the carrier to get her through the finish line. I was piecemealing settlements out at that point. And I just canceled on her. So I read her letter of cancellation, and she said, no, I want you to come back. And I said, if you can promise me you won't do that again, I'll come back. She said no. So the attorney that I had brought on board to connect her with ended up getting over $250K. I walked away from 15 grand out of that situation, and I don't have any qualms about it.
Right.
You know? And
I've been in that situation myself too. I had a client, and we're talking a smaller check, $10,000. The check came to my office. I signed the check and endorsed it, and I overnighted it to them, certified mail. They claim they never got it. I don't know how, because the certified mail said it was dropped off. This guy was calling me through the weekend, leaving voicemails. I know you have $10,000 in your personal account, so why don't you just give me $10,000, and when the new check comes in, I'll reimburse you. And he was like threatening me. I'll turn you into the state unless you give me $10,000. I said, what are you talking about? Your check was mailed to you. Here's the tracking. It said it was, it was delivered. And this person just called and called and called. And I finally said, you know what? For the 10% of $10,000, which is $1,000, I'm done. Like,
yeah,
you can keep your 10 grand. I released the client, sent a letter over. And the funny thing is, the insurance adjuster called me and said, are they being as difficult? Because they're calling, trying to get you taken off the check now that you got them money. And I run
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm so fortunate to work with really great people. All of my clients, even in their most difficult situations, in their most difficult moments, are going to have a hard time at some point. And, what do they say in therapy? Hurt people. I get that sometimes they need a whipping post, and I'm a strong-willed person, and I'm not easy to shake. Sometimes I just let it happen, and then when they're done, like, okay, can we now have a conversation about what we can do to resolve this? Like, now that you've vented, let's create a strategy for moving forward, right? And no two claims are the same. You can have the same procedure on any type of loss, and it still needs to be adjusted, right? So explaining the process to people without giving them guarantees is the hardest part of my job, right?
Exactly.
I can't tell you what the end result is going to be on your claim. What I can tell you is that I have 350 clients that are happy with the services I provided them.
There you go.
Right? So I don't overpromise and underdeliver. I do the exact opposite. I give clear disclosure on all the possible outcomes, and I let them know which outcome I am angling for, right? So, for instance, my California Fair Plan claim in Fallbrook right now, weird situation. They had their loss at the exact same time as the Eaton and Palisades fires, and California Fair Plan bundled them under the wildfire claims.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're 100 miles away from them. So I had to fight to separate that claim from that. And January 7th loss, we're only now seeing supplemental payments today.
Why would they do that? What was their excuse for bundling a claim under something? I mean, that's ridiculous. 100
they saw
miles.
the data loss and they saw fire, and they were like, cool, wildfire.
So a stray ember flew 100 miles and
yeah, I know.
like Forrest Gump's feather.
I can't explain California Fair Plan's logic. I don't know how they're operating, but I fought tooth and nail to do something that they typically haven't done, which is in excess of an IA, get a general contractor assigned to write a comparative bid, which significantly pushed the delta on this claim. So where we had 120K, another 250 is getting settled out now. And we're not done. And the insured's really happy, right? But I'm also letting them know, like, look, this is an initial settlement that is going to very much peel the onion back even further. You have structural damage to your property. We're going to need an engineer. We may have to rip off this entire elevation of your roof. It's a bathroom fan fire that engulfed the attic and fell back down into the property. So those, I will say this, California Fair Plan, where smoke is not concerned, is manageable. The biggest gripe that people have with California Fair Plan is their illegal practices of denying smoke damage to people's property.
So speaking of Fair Plan, though, what are you seeing as far as these Palisades and Altadena fires dealing with the Fair Plan, or have you not really dealt with them much? Are you not working with those type of clients, or what's going on with that? Because I'm hearing all sorts of nightmare stories with Fair Plan with the large fires you guys had at the beginning of the year.
So I've actually been working as a consultant on quite a few California fair plan claims because I don't want my name tied to them.
Okay.
It's way too much work for too uncertain of an outcome. The vast majority of them are going to need an attorney. So I have 2 branches of service under my hat here. One is the public adjusting side. This is how I make my income. It's what I do that I'm passionate about. It's what I'm building the company around. And then on the other side, there's consulting services where somebody might need a public adjuster, but it's not a good fit, right? So I can still provide them my investigative facts of a claim. They just have to communicate it to the insurance company on their own, right?
Right.
And I do this in an hourly rate or a flat rate. I do 3-dimensional maps of their property, quarterback sending out hygienists and telling them what we're looking for them to investigate, right? So in Altadena, it's lead, asbestos, cyanide, dioxins, heavy metals, a lot of really toxic soup shit that gets overlooked when you do combustion byproduct sampling for just the char and ash. Understanding what the composition of that is significantly improves the argument for you to remove damaged material, right? But California Fair Plan says that if it's not visible with the naked eye, if you can't smell it, then it doesn't exist, right?
But smoke is a carcinogen. Like, you don't know what your neighbor's house, if that house was built in the 40s, there could be asbestos in that. There could be lead in that. There could be all sorts of chemicals in the paint and stuff like that. And I've been to California, multiple times. Beautiful state, but a lot of the homes are older. They were built. Yeah. A lot of these homes are built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Well, that's the scary thing about Eaton too, is it's not just about the construction of the homes, but like the tragedy of it all is these are generational homes, right?
Right.
So these are multi-generation families that have been passing this home on to the next generation. And these people can't afford to rebuild them. So they're letting people come in and buy them up. I don't know if you saw this. It's now getting passed through for approval to put in the middle of the Palisades, low-income housing. Now,
I didn't know that. For real?
Yeah. I mean, we're again, tinfoil hat. We're angling towards 15-minute cities. But I think it's a tragedy. People fought their whole lives to buy properties in the most beautiful area in the country. And yes, we have housing needs. Yes, there are people in that area that are not necessarily giving back to the economy, right? Older family homes. But that doesn't give our state the right to rezone property to diminish the value of everybody that spent a lifetime building enough money to move there,
I saw a really cool multi-generational home in Altadena where we went, and the granddaughter actually met us, and she was in her mid-20s. Her husband was there. Her husband was a firefighter. And we went upstairs, looked at the property, and I said, well, who owns the house? She goes, well, my dad owns the house. And her dad lived on the second floor or the first floor, and then the grandparents lived on an attached in-law suite. So all 3 people lived there, and their house was all tons of ash, like you could run your finger and just see the ash and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't understand that California is big on those multi-generational homes. There's a lot of people, because you guys have that law in place for your property taxes and stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, right. You can defer property taxes by transferring rights for a property through family. And then, I mean, that gets convoluted if you want to get into it. You do any upgrades to the home, they reevaluate for property tax. There's always a way for somebody to make money off of a homeowner. But I think at the end of the day, there's an entire ecosystem that is involved in the insurance claim process, right?
Right.
And I'm one part of this entire diverse system, and I'm the only entity that is incentivized to directly benefit the insured by arguing for more money, right? The only one that on a contingency will make more money by doing better. And that's not to say that general contractors couldn't do that, but UPPA, unauthorized practice of public adjusting, is a major concern. They're not allowed to interpret policy. They're not just allowed to say whether a coverage decision was right or wrong. And those two things have been kept separate on purpose. So you need,
and you see a lot of that.
Public adjuster. Yeah.
You see a lot of that. I've seen a lot of people that I know. I actually had to send a message to a person, I won't name them on here. They were taking pictures of hail, holding hail in their hand and saying, hey, if you have an insurance claim on your home, let us know. I can negotiate it for you, or I'll get you the most money. And I'm like, you're a roofing contractor. You got to stop that. And, you know, the problem is, and this is no offense to my contractor connections out there, my buddies, is if you're a roofer, you're focusing on the roof. You're not focusing on the whole property. So there could be damage to the siding. There could be damage to the windows, the glass doors, or whatever, but you're only caring about the roof, and the insurance company loves that. Yeah, I'll give you this much for the roof and forget the rest of it. And the homeowner doesn't know any better. And you're starting to see a lot of unpracticed public adjusting, a lot in Texas, believe it or not, a lot in Texas from contractors.
And I see. So I'm without social media. I only have LinkedIn, and that's recent just because I started my own company and I want to engage with more people in the community. But I follow quite a few people from both sides of the fence that talk a lot about what's going on with UPPA in Texas. And, you know, again, I think I see both sides of it. It's not a good idea to have a contractor or a vendor also be a public adjuster. There are some states that allow that.
Yes.
But I also think it's a travesty that homeowners have to consider hiring a public adjuster because when they have a very competent contractor that understands how to navigate an insurance claim, has had the rug swept from underneath them because they're being told they're not allowed to, you know, advocate for their client. On the flip side, an insured can represent themselves. If somebody is competent enough to explain the process to them, they can advocate for themselves under guidance from anybody, right? There's no license for consulting.
Right.
So that's part of the reason I keep the consulting side of this open too. So I have, you know, mitigation vendors, general contractors, and insureds alike that will call me for advice and hire me as a consultant.
Right.
And it often ends with me giving documents to an insured without any title or anything on it, for them to submit it to the carrier on their own, right? Like a ghostwriter, you know?
Yeah.
And with the advent of AI, I mean, Copilot's one of my best friends right now. I spend a lot of time talking to Copilot because it's diminished the amount of time it takes for me to scrub through California insurance code and regulation and law, right?
Right.
Now I can directly reference, hey, here is an issue I'm having, list off of these documents any potential violations to it. And now it'll automatically pull it up. And where I used to write 10-page letters, I can now use Copilot to condense that down into 4 cohesive paragraphs that are legible enough for a 5-year-old, right? And that's the assumption you have to make. I don't want to put people on blast, but I found out, I mean, there's quite a few companies that hire them. Emerald Claim Services gets discounts for hiring ex-cons.
Wow.
So it's like, you don't know who's adjusting your claim on the death side. I had an insurance adjuster have me explain why water had intruded through 4 layers of abandoned flooring. He said, that's not possible. I was like, well, who told you that? So I had to literally just sit down with this adjuster for 45 minutes and explain how water migrates and wicks up into material. And this was 5 months after a loss. And now I'm fighting with this carrier to cover the mold damage that they ultimately caused by not allowing for an abatement or the homeowner to move out of the house. So, I mean, the real concern that I have is a lack of education in the industry from all sides, right? This is something that I think is really hurting our industry as a whole. It's hard to find employees that are self-motivated and hold themselves accountable and understand the process. You know, they're getting paid minimum wage to go in, rip material out, and then go home, right?
Right.
They don't understand why it needs to be documented a certain way or how it needs to be documented to be accepted by an insurance company. But there is like a way to do that, at least in water losses, that I've been training people, like using different types of moisture meters, using both pin and relative, getting multiple people to validate moisture maps. When you go on site, mark with a piece of tape, this is now going to be the area I moisture map over the next 5 days. or I take moisture readings over the next 5 days and mark each day with the readings on the tape. So that when I come back and I scan the property, I have references to it. When I come in and I validate the work that somebody else has done as a separate vendor, that adds weight to their argument, right? But again, going back to like just the mitigation side, you have technicians that are going on site, doing work, not taking photos, going home, and then leaving it to the administrative side to argue the work that they did with an insurance company. And they're taking 8 months to argue a ridiculous bill for 80 grand, ultimately settling at 30. I've been arguing with them to allow me to help them streamline that process to mitigate the administrative load and arguing for outcomes. We get resolutions in 2 to 3 months instead of 8 months. And we are arguing for the actual value owed, not this game of we go high, you go low, we meet somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And both the insurance and vendor side of the market seem to play that game endlessly. And I think it damages us. I also spoke with a preferred vendor yesterday. I don't say names, but they said they're leaving their preferred vendor status because they are forcing them, they're being forced to make concessions that are hurting their company. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to bring up because, on the preferred vendor side, if you are allowing carriers to dictate values below what is actually owed for the work that needs to be performed, you're eating yourself. And you're supporting the insurance company and making an argument that this is an acceptable payment, right? So I don't want to have this conversation too long, but one of the things that I always push for is when a preferred vendor is involved, they owe me their original work product, unedited by the carrier. And it is the carrier's ownership to document and describe what they have adjusted to that estimate. And if I find a preferred vendor is sharing their estimate files with the carrier and allowing them to actively edit it, I'll raise hell.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest indicators of bad faith in this industry.
Well, you've been seeing that a lot of estimates, not just for preferred vendors or right to repair contractors, but also for field adjusters themselves. They're finding that, a field adjuster go out there and say, okay, this is, $200,000 worth of damage. And by the time it gets done with the desk adjuster, it's 50 grand because they took everything off. And it was just a testimony in front of the Senate not that long ago.
And Xactimate could fix, any estimating software company could fix this immediately. Create a chain of custody. Just like evidence on a claim. Like you touch it, you have a tag associated with your Xactimate profile that says you touched it. But that's not what carriers want. They don't want disclosure. So I do the same thing on my side. I work occasionally with homeowners that have a buddy that's a contractor that writes shit on a napkin, and I can't submit it to the insurance company. So I will take their estimate, re-amalgamate it into Xactimate, get their company header, their license, and send it back to them and say, I need your explicit approval to submit this to the carrier on your behalf. But I've put this in a format that they're willing to interpret it and accept now. And I've never been met with resistance on that. And I do it at a cost for myself. It costs me, at a minimum $400 or $500 to write an estimate every time.
So where do you see the state of insurance going in California?
George Soros said it at like the World Economic Forum. Nobody will own anything and everybody will be happy about it. That's where I see it going. I think home ownership is going to become increasingly more difficult. You're going to see a lot more renters policies. You're going to see a lot of property management ownership. I think the nuclear family is getting destroyed in California just because of the difficulty in maintaining a property financially. There's a huge disparity. There's a huge wealth gap in California. And that's evident just on like the homelessness that you see in every metropolitan area. It grows.
I was at the stadium there in San Diego. Beautiful stadium. And I've been to so many baseball stadiums, but when you walked out of the stadium, I felt like I was like in like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, man. It was like, I'm walking through with, two dudes and a girl, and I'm like, okay, guys, knuckle up because I think we're gonna. There might be something happen here.
I would say that there is a void in the market right now for fireproofing materials being installed on homes. We don't have any real code compliance for it. The Palisades, I believe, are starting to do some of that, but fireproofing homes absolutely would have prevented the Palisades and Eaton wildfires. These are a lot of older construction homes with open vents in the soffits, gaps between tiles in the roof, and pretty much wood siding everywhere. With you can shine a flashlight around the house and find holes straight to the exterior. With good fireproofing, I would expect insurers to return to the market with a much more reasonable stance, but that's just not the case of things, and nobody can afford to do that to their home, right? I don't think we should be allowing pretty much matchboxes to get rebuilt in these fire zones,
So where do you see your company going in the next 5 years? What's your big plan? Are you going to expand other parts of California? Are you looking to go in other states like Arizona, Nevada?
Well, San Diego is definitely not short of work. There's plenty of work opportunities here. I could absolutely expand to go to other states. I do want to be an expert witness and a consultant for larger losses that, namely commercial. I'd like to edge into commercial more than anything. The commercial losses I have adjusted were significantly less painful than dealing with homeowners directly. There's not as much back and forth, and you really do get to advocate for an outcome without too much of the claim therapy,
Mm-hmm.
But in 5 years, my goals really aren't grandiose. I want an employee in a year, an employee every year, right? So I've got one other employee right now. And I'd like to get into a position where I can focus solely on business development, training, and management, which is what I went to school for. So where I was looking for a place to employ me to do that, I've just decided to build it on my own. And then ultimately within the next decade, I want to, maybe make 5% of everybody's income to take a step back and enjoy life after building the framework for everybody else to profit off of,
So if you had to go back in time and talk to that young Loren before he joined the Coast Guard, the one that was in Chicago, hopefully not hanging out in Cabrini Green, anything like that.
I went to school at Wells and Division for high school. I was 2 blocks from Cabrini before it was $1 million condos. Yeah.
If you had to go back in time and talk to that young Loren, that 16, 17-year-old Loren, what would you tell him now?
It's funny that my wife and I talk about this all the time, the what ifs, right? I wouldn't change a thing, man. The good, the bad, the ugly. It's a part of the human experience. I did some spectacular screw ups, but they're also what's shaped me into who I am today. I'd tell him just continue to persevere. My father raised me with a few sayings. One of them is, success is the ability to sustain the effort. Don't give up. Always push through. Doesn't matter if you fail early, fail often, and fail hard, because that is what motivates you. I don't know that everybody else feels that way. I feel like a lot of people insulate themselves from failure or ever having to experience feelings of failure. I thrive in it. I have full confidence that I'm going to have shitty situations again in my life and that I'll be okay. I'll get through it.
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, where's a good place to find your PA firm and reach out to you if they say, hey, I have a claim or I have a question or I'd like to, run something past you? Where can they find you online?
Okay. So I have a website, www.lionpa.com. That's lion, publicadjusting.com, but Lion PA rather. And you can find me on Yelp and Google, but I've built my business around handshakes and trust. I don't have a lot of an online presence. I could give my phone number out.
I
don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. Has got a wide reach. I'm licensed only in California. I'm not hard to search for if you know what you're looking for. But Lion Public Adjusting is the name of my company. There are maybe 2,000 public adjusters for a state of 40 million homeowners in California.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't have any real dreams of leaving San Diego. I go as far north as LA, as far south as Hamul. If somebody calls me in San Francisco and it's a sizable enough loss, I'll fly up there. But I'm pretty much 100-mile radius around my home. And that's by design. I'm a baseball coach. I should say that. I was raised by two really hardworking parents that had to defer, being present for their kids in this way sometimes. And, they say that, in parenting your own children, parents will often do polar opposites of theirs. So I thrive making my life difficult to be present for my kids' sports. I coach 4 different teams, and I've got an 11-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy. They're both amazing athletes. And I want to see them develop. They're only going to be kids for so long. And, if I'm not working here, I'm out in a baseball field yelling at 6 and 11-year-olds. So,
well, Loren, it's been great having you on the show. And if you guys are out there listening to Loren and are interested in reaching out to him, I can personally vouch for him. He's a great guy. He's going to be honest with you. He's going to work with you. If he can't help you out, he'll try to point you in the right direction, or at least give you some tips on what you need to do. And Loren, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Keith, Kevin, for having me on. I got to say real quick, I didn't mention it once. Ethics first. That's really what I market. It's integrity, right? If you're in a difficult situation and you can navigate it on your own, my solemn promise is that I'll give you an hour of my time and tell you how to do it for free. And I do that. I walk away from a lot of work opportunities just because I'd rather people know that they can do this than take the reins for them and take it off their plate. And sometimes people at the end of those conversations come back and they say, you know what, this is still really daunting. I just want you here for the convenience. So one other place you can find me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty indiscriminate about adding people as friends on there. I don't have a premium account and I want to be able to talk to anybody. So if anybody needs any help, I'm a consumer advocate first. Love to talk to you.
So if you were in Southern California, San Diego, Orange County, all the way up to Los Angeles, if you have any type of loss, whether that be a weather-related loss, a water loss, a vehicle drove through your house by accident, it doesn't matter. Fire damage, get a hold of Loren. He will take care of you, him and his team. Like I said, I can personally vouch for Loren. And, if you guys can't get a hold of Loren and you need to get a hold of him or you want to speak with him, you can always reach out to me as well. And I'll get you two connected and help you out. So if you like what you saw, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and click that notification bell below, and make sure you hit the little ring bell on there that lets you know that when we're coming live or we're going to air an episode. We're also on Spotify, we're on Amazon, we're on Apple, as well as Rumble, and we also are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the TikTok. Yes, the dreaded TikTok. The Kerfuffle is on the TikTok. So until next time, have fun storming the castle.